Hey guys, it's Joe of WagerTalk. I'm joined today by Dave Cokin. We're talking Big Ten Conference. Dave, let's jump right into it. Illinois, what are you thinking of this team? They've got Brett Bielema. Where do you see them going?
Not far right away. Bielema's got to change the culture there. It's been a losing culture for some time. He's clearly an upgrade as far as the head coaching goes. He doesn't have a lot of talent right now, but what you'll get out of Illinois is fundamental football. They'll get strong at that right away. His task will be to build the offensive line, build a running game. I don't think he's got the pieces in place this year, and the Big 12 is loaded as usual. So Illinois is going to be in for a rough season. No bowl game for the Illini yet, but I think in a couple of years you'll see quite a bit of improvement with this program moving forward.
Okay, so Indiana. Questions on health for their quarterback. I'm not sure if he's going to be back or if he's going to be able to stay healthy this year. I know they do have 9 starters back on their defensive side of the ball. What are your hopes for this team?
Well, look, they're a talented crew. The days of mediocrity are pretty much done for Indiana. Wilson's done a good job of stabilizing this program and making them a team you got a game plan for every week. No easy wins against Indiana. I think they're a pretty good team. The tough thing for them is their schedule is nasty this year, and that's probably going to cause them to lose some games or lose more games than their fans would like. Their fans are getting accustomed to winning games. Middle of the pack team in the Big Ten, probably a little better than that if they in terms of their overall talent. I think they'll have a decent season and get to a minor bowl, and if they do that, it'll be a success.
So Iowa, they finished last season strong. They've got a great running back, Tyler Goodson. What is their quarterback position looking like?
That's a concern. It's less of a concern with Iowa than it is for other programs because basically it's just somebody to manage the game. The way Iowa approaches things, their strength is on their defense. That's the way they want to go out and play low-scoring games, stay in it, try and win it in the fourth quarter, and they'll probably do more of that this season. That's what they do every year. I don't think Iowa can contend for the Big Ten title, but I think they're going to be a rock-solid program, probably fourth best team in the conference overall, somewhere in that range.
Okay, Dave, let's move on to Maryland. Now, this team has shown improvements. Which way do you see them going?
Down. I'm not a big Loxley guy, and I think Maryland got maybe fortunate in some games last year. My power rating have them way down in the conference. In fact, I've got them pretty much in the same neighborhood as Illinois in the conference. So I think Maryland probably overachieved a bit, and I would look for reality to set in this year. I think this is going to be a very long season for the Terrapins.
Now, is it going to be a long season for Michigan? I know there's been a lot of changes on their coaching staff. Will they do better this season?
And it's kind of defined better. I think they'll be improved over last year, but I think the reality is, and I know Michigan fans are going to hate me for saying this, and some others might disagree vehemently, but I don't think Michigan's an elite program right now. I think they've got an elite past, an elite history, an elite fan base with that 100,000 plus that pack that stadium every week and will do so now that fans are back at games. But I don't think it's a real good program. I don't think it's bad by any means. I'm not trying to make it sound like Michigan's going to be a bunch of stiffs, but I really think they're kind of a middle of the pack team in the Big Ten this year. I've got them maybe fifth or sixth overall. So if people are expecting a return to glory for Michigan, they're going to probably have to wait another year.
Okay, now are you thinking the same thing for Michigan State? Michigan State had a hard year last year. They had so many turnovers.
I look. I wasn't crazy about their coaching hire, and I just don't know that it's going to get it done. They weren't good in close games last year. I think it might be more of the same, and I'm looking at them in their week one matchup with Northwestern and saying to myself, Michigan State on paper probably ought to beat this team. And in fact, I've got the power rated higher than Northwestern. But then I look at the coaching, and I know where the coaching advantage is in that game. And I think that's going to be the case in Michigan State games throughout the season. So not a bad team on paper, but I would not look for them to have a positive outcome this year. I think Michigan State will be fortunate to win half their games.
Ouch, that hurts for all the Michigan State fans out there, definitely, Dave. Now, let's move on to Minnesota. Now, this is a team where I really like their quarterback, Tanner Morgan, and I think they have a solid O-line. I know, believe they have power in the trenches. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think they do have power in the trenches. I think they're very strong on both lines, offensive line and defensive line. And I think they've got the necessary skill position players to be a dynamic offensive team. Where my worries are for Minnesota is the back seven on defense, linebacker, and the secondary. I think that's down some, and I think that's what's going to separate them from being able to play with the big boys in the Big Ten. They'll be a good program. They're going to get to another bowl. They'll be rowing the boat all season, but they're not good enough to contend with the top teams in the conference. And I'll have them in the higher end of the middle of the pack for the Big 12 this season, Big 10 this season.
Okay, talking about getting to a bowl game. Can Nebraska get to a bowl game under Coach Frost?
It's going to be really interesting because there have been a couple off the field issues. Nebraska hasn't lived up to the optimism that was created when Frost took the job, and the steps forward have been marginal at best. We're getting to the point now where Nebraska's got a pretty demanding fan base, and you just wonder if they have another ordinary type season, whether the heat might start to get turned up on Frost. That's something we'll have to wait and see. But I think that's what's in store for Nebraska. I think they're an okay team, but I don't think they've improved themselves enough to do anything but finish in the middle of the pack again and be scrambling to get to a bowl game at the end of the season. I don't know that that's good enough for the Nebraska faithful.
Absolutely. What about Northwestern? We've got Coach Fitzgerald here, which is outstanding at building lights out defenses. He's improved the offense since he's been there. Where do you see this team going?
And Northwestern is the biggest quandary for me because on paper, they're not very good, particularly this year. They've lost some key pieces. And, I mean, there's just nothing. When I look at their roster, there's nothing that stands out and says this is going to be a team that has another great season. I've got them pegged down low in the Big Ten, but there's an asterisk on that, and that's Fitzgerald. This guy's one of the best coaches in the country. I'm not sure there's anybody who gets more out of his talent than Northwestern. So while I am not optimistic about their chances this season, nothing's going to surprise me with Northwestern. They might find a way to be respectable again.
I definitely hope they do. Now, moving on to Ohio State, Coach Ryan Day, can he get them to another regular season without being defeated?
Very possible. I don't think they're quite as good a team as they were last year, but that doesn't mean they're still not real good. And when the dust settles at the end of the season, I fully expect Ohio State to be battling for another spot in the playoffs. And they are the best team in the Big Ten on paper. Good coach, good talent, lots of depth. Ohio State's going to be real tough to beat again.
Absolutely. So, Dave, any hopes that Penn State will be tough to beat? You know, things just went terribly wrong for them last year. Can they bounce back this one?
Well, yeah, they ought to, because they were much better than their record showed last year. They just found a way to screw up games. They had, early in the season, they had 2 games where they outgained the opponent by 200 yards, more than 200 yards, and lost both games. You can't do that. Once is a fluke. You do it twice, that's a real bad deal. So it was all about mistakes for Penn State last season. We're going to find out right away where this team is mentally. They've got a very difficult first game at Wisconsin. On paper, it's a game they can go in and win, but they're going to have to prove that they can play on the field with smarts and not create the bad giveaways that they had last season. Otherwise, Penn State going to get itself behind the 8 ball early on, and the problems that ballooned last season could reappear again. But make no mistake, this is a Penn State team with a chance to be very good, top 3 in the Big Ten on paper.
Well, I love that. I do love Penn State, so let's hope they do that. Moving on to Purdue. Now, this is a team that's got a really hard schedule this year. Their defense allowed so many yards, but they have got a new coordinator in there, I believe.
Yeah, he's got the same players, though. And I think this
True.
is going to be Purdue. They're going to be pretty good offensively, and they're going to be pretty bad defensively. I just don't see the personnel strength on defense for them to move up as far as that goes. They might outscore some teams, but they're just not going to outscore the real good programs. So I think it's going to be a down year for Purdue. I would expect a losing season for Brom. Some things that point to a brighter future. I don't think they'll show up this year, though.
Okay, so Rutgers, can they improve on their third down conversions?
You know, Schiano's going to do what he's a good enough coach to get the max out of this team, but Rutgers is going to face the same problem basically every year in the Big Ten. They're in the financially they're in the right conference. I'm sure they do very well in terms of the revenue, but competitive wise, I don't know that Rutgers is ever going to contend for anything in this conference. They just don't have the recruiting base that other programs have in the Big Ten. So it's going to be more of the same for Rutgers. They might steal a few wins, but I don't think there's much hope for anything other than a respectable losing season at best, and it could be worse than that. I would not be shocked if Rutgers is down at the bottom of the league with Illinois and in terms of fighting to see who's the very bottom of the conference this season.
Definitely not a position any team wants to be in. Moving on to Wisconsin now. This team, they didn't have those big plays that I really wanted to see last season. They've got a decent up front, but what are your hopes for them? Can they make a run at this?
Yeah, sure, because Wisconsin's is the same team every year. They're as fundamentally solid as any program in the country. They're never going to wow you. I mean, it's just not a team that's going to go out there and play wide open football. That's not what they do. The great thing about Wisconsin is they know their personality as a football program, and that serves them extremely well because they play to their strengths and they stay away from their weaknesses. Extremely well coached team, enough talent and strength up front, so they're going to be real solid. And if there's a team that's capable of knocking off Ohio State and pulling the upset and getting the conference championship, I think it's Wisconsin. I've got them as the second best team in the league.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for joining us for the Big Ten Conference preview. You can find all of Dave's plays over at WagerTalk.com.